this is More Than a Love Interest, the show where we talk about the arcs of female characters in film. Today, to continue getting hyped for the Black Widow movie, we are talking about her best appearance in the MCU. Captain America, the Winter Soldier is in the style of a spy thriller, which is the perfect place for the Black Widow to show off. First, we will talk about her as a spy, then her character arc, and finish up with a discussion on gender roles in this film. Let's get started. Like the previous episodes, we're going to kick things off with how Natasha uses her skills as a spy. This is a significant part of her character, of course, and of her contributions to the team.
Agent Romanoff is comfortable with everything.
Captain America, the Winter Soldier, gives her abilities a real spotlight as the surrounding story is about spycraft. And, importantly, our protagonist has to learn a lot from her to get by.
I'm multitasking.
The movie begins with a mission to take back the Lemurian star from pirates. Rumlow briefs Steve and Nat, and Nat redirects him when he questions what the ship is doing there.
You know, I'm getting a little tired of being Fury's janitor.
Relax, it's not that complicated.
She is working for Fury and has her own mission, one that they don't want Captain America to get wind of. On the ship, she is given the task of taking over the engine room on her own. She may come down from the Quinjet with the rest of the strike team, but Steve, and the filmmakers by proxy, deem her capable of handling a significant portion of the job without help. She is successful, of course. I'm a huge fan of this scene in particular.
Hey, Scarlet.
Man, does she love her job. It reminds me of this panel in the comics where Nat is really enjoying herself on a mission that involves, falling with style. And I think seeing this kind of thing is pretty rare for female characters. But Nat here gets to be thrilled to have snuck up on this dude and say a joke. She also enjoys this moment later when she's baiting the Winter Soldier. We'll come back to that. So first of all, Nat is allowed to have a significant role in the mission, she doesn't need any help, and is clearly enjoying herself. That's pretty great female representation. She does have her own mission though, and Steve is pretty betrayed by that. It does allow for Batroc to escape, and she feels pretty bad about disappointing Steve. And who wouldn't? Look at his disappointed face. Later, we see her talking to Steve after Fury's death.
Why was Fury in your apartment?
Though she is devastated by this, she immediately questions Steve because she can tell he knows more than he's letting on, and gives her first piece of spy advice to him.
You're a terrible liar.
Which informs how he answers Pierce's questions and avoids saying any outright lies. Next, he returns to find that she, 1, was suspicious of his actions, 2, figured out he hid the drive in the vending machine, and 3, knew to wait for him to come back. Since none of the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents noticed, that seems like she had a pretty good assessment of the situation. She bargains with him for information. I like this line.
I only act like I know everything, Rogers.
Because it gives us some good insight into her actual methods, though through a joke, something that is usually reserved for male characters. Then it's really her time to shine, as she knows exactly where to go and how to handle their pursuers.
First rule of going on the run is don't run, walk.
He views things as a soldier and is great in combat scenarios, but she is a spy, and being unnoticed is a huge part of that job. So she leads him somewhere to find out more about the drive, then leads him back out even though the strike team has arrived, and pass within feet of them without noticing. And Steve Rogers is pretty noticeable.
Specimen.
I am also a huge fan of this line.
The person who developed this is slightly smarter than me. Slightly.
Because, well, it's not something female characters often get to be. In most team-up movies, the smart character is the male nerd. And I'm not alone in starting to cringe at that line because I expected her to be proven wrong about being smart. Women are so often punished in movies for saying something positive about themselves. But she isn't. And she shows that she is very smart because even if she can't get into the drive, she has another plan for how to pursue this further. And then she's explicitly shown as being smarter than Steve because his ideas would have gotten them caught.
If they make us, I'll engage. You hit the south escalator of the metro.
And hers get them out of the building and on the road.
Shut up and put your arm around me. Laugh at something I said.
And I honestly can't think of the last time a female character was both stated to be and then shown to be smarter than, or even just better at something than, the male protagonist. Not that Steve is dumb or anything. He gets to have his smart moments as well, particularly on the base.
This building's in the wrong place.
Because everyone gets to be smart and have good ideas, which is great. Anyway, they barely escape and then have the good idea to go find that dude that Steve met jogging.
On your left.
On my left. Got it.
I like how it's clearly framed that they have followed him home from jogging, since how else would they know where he lived? Sam gets to be smart too and offers to help them out. Both of them get to look awesome and capable when Sam describes how hard it will be to get the Falcon suit.
The last one is at Fort Meade, behind 3 guarded gates and a 12-inch steel wall.
And then all 3 of them do as they capture and question Sitwell. This part is also a great reference to the comics.
You're right. It's not. It's hers.
This scene and later ones establish that the Black Widow and Falcon are teaming up with Captain America, not that they're his sidekicks. Then, speaking of Cap's sidekicks, the Winter Soldier tracks them down, and Nat, the genius, immediately saves all of their lives by anticipating where the Winter Soldier is going to shoot to take them all out. She doesn't anticipate his team ramming the car, though, so drops her gun briefly. Steve saves all of them as the car flips over, and then everyone gets a chance to shine again. Nat evades successfully using her grappling hook, then runs to where the Winter Soldier doesn't expect her and shoots him in the face. Which, literally and figuratively starts to break through his armor, because he gets mad, the only emotion we've seen from him thus far. So she successfully baits him into chasing her, even though that's probably not his highest priority.
2 targets, level 6.
Then she tricks him with a voice recorder, though how does he know what she sounds like? And jumps on him. But her signature move doesn't work. Fortunately, she always has contingency plans, so resorts to using one of her stingers and fleeing. She is again telling civilians to get out of the way, much like when fleeing from the Hulk in the last movie. Fortunately, Steve is there to save the day, something she and Sam repay him for soon after when Bucky is distracted. The following scenes are more related to her emotional journey, which I'll talk about in the next section. So the next big moment for her as a spy is this one. She's been successfully disguised as this older woman for several scenes, and we, the audience, are as shocked as Pierce when she casually knocks these dudes out. And then she gets that killer line and takes control of the situation.
Did I step on your moment?
Like in Iron Man 2, she is adept at manipulating technology and can hack S.H.I.E.L.D. just as easily as she did Vanko. She again gets to be cocky without repercussions.
Are you sure you're ready for the world to see you as you really are?
Are you?
Rare for a female character. The emotional ending of the movie is with Steve and Bucky, of course, but I do like how Nat and Nick have an emotional moment as well.
Natasha, come on!
In her final scene, Nat gives Steve some info on the Winter Soldier, again showing her spy skills in getting, apparently, the actual file that Hydra had on him. She is also pleased with herself and the idea of going to make new covers.
I blew all my covers. I gotta go figure out a new one.
Back to enjoying her job even if S.H.I.E.L.D. is gone.
I'm counting on it.
She gives Steve some good life advice, both about Sharon
Will you do me a favor? Call that nurse?
and Bucky,
Might not want to pull on that thread.
and heads off into the sunset. So what I find especially meaningful about Nat in this movie is that she doesn't have a female role. She gets to do a lot of things that are usually the province of male characters. Being smug without comeuppance, being a nerd, being more capable than the protagonist, etc. And I mean, I liked her character before, but this was really her breakout as more than just the girl one of the team. It helps that there are not very many characters in the movie, giving her character more room to breathe and grow. So let's talk about just how much of a journey she goes on. Now, on to Nat's character arc. I would not say that she has a character arc in all of her appearances, mainly because she is not usually the main protagonist, but she is essentially a co-lead here, so I think we can use the heroine's journey to talk about what she is going through. The first step of the journey is the separation from the feminine. For most characters, this means leaving behind the familiar, like one's mother, to go out on her own. I think it's pretty cool that Natasha here gets a whole scene in her element before we see her taken out of it. Hang on! The feminine for her is her role as a spy, but more specifically working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and for Nick Fury. She reveals to Steve that, though she is on a mission under Captain America's command, she is actually doing her own thing under Fury's direction.
It's called compartmentalization. Nobody spills the secrets because nobody knows them all.
And she considers this sort of compartmentalization a normal part of her job. Her separation comes when Fury is killed. Well, as far as she knows.
They cut you open, your heart stopped.
It takes her out of her comfort zone and thrusts her into the plot of the movie just as much as it does for Steve. But while Steve is dealing with a conspiracy, Natasha is grappling with the loss of one of the most important people in her life, who is a huge influence on who she is and how she sees the world.
Don't do this to me, Nick.
The second step is gaining masculine allies. This would obviously be Steve, though this starts out a bit rocky. They were allies in the opening scene, but then she had other motives on that mission. And now that Fury told him to trust no one, well, he isn't sure how much he can really trust Nat. She is being an ally to him right away, though, telling him that he's a bad liar before he goes to be debriefed. And then she notices the drive he left behind. She uses it to bargain for information and for his trust.
Like you said, he's a ghost story.
Unlike most stories of the journey where the female character easily befriends masculine allies, Natasha has to work a little harder for hers. But that is genre appropriate. It's hard to know who to trust in a spy thriller, and she isn't offended by Steve's caution, though she is by Fury's, something we'll come back to. Next comes the road of trials. This is something the heroine goes through with her new ally. Natasha and Steve team up to go investigate the drive, then go to New Jersey and find Zola, barely escape with their lives, and then go team up with Sam. Sam is another of Nat's masculine allies, of course, though he starts as Steve's. Anyway, her trials strengthen her place with her masculine allies and lead to the next step. The illusion of success is something that the heroine reaches with her masculine allies, where it seems like teaming up with them is going to lead to an achievement, but ultimately does not, because she needs to be in touch with both sides of herself for a lasting success. The success here is recruiting Sam to help them, getting his suit, and capturing Jasper Sitwell. It's really this scene where Sitwell spills all his secrets and explains what they need to know.
The inside helicarrier scratched people off the list. A few million at a time.
They were able to discover all of this and can now build a plan to overcome their enemies.
We'll use them to bypass the DNA scans and access the helicarriers directly.
But this victory is, after all, an illusion. For Nat's emotional journey, this achievement makes working with Steve look like she will get to know everything that's going on. No more compartmentalization. So that makes the next steps all the more devastating when their victory is meaningless. The illusion is shattered quite thoroughly on the highway. Their lead is taken from them and they are pushed back on their heels. The Winter Soldier and his people attack, and she uses everything in her arsenal to evade him, and is not successful. She is still shot and terrified. Steve saves her life before the Winter Soldier can kill her, but they are still captured by Hydra. The fifth step is when the heroine is at a pretty low point spiritually. Natasha's been shot, her mentor/closest relationship is dead, the company to whom she dedicated her life turns out to have been Hydra the whole time, and now she's been captured. You could say her lowest point was here, where she has a heart-to-heart with Steve about her existential crisis, but they talk through it and they have options to move forward. So I would argue that being taken by Hydra, where Steve is emotionally reeling and she is very injured, is her lowest point. She has no reason to think that this is a scrape they can get out of. The sixth step is the descent, and it really means being at your lowest point but finding inner strength hidden deep down. It is usually a reconnection with the feminine for the heroine to have, and that's how it works here.
That thing was squeezing my brain.
Nat is at her lowest point, though still reaching out to emotionally support Steve with regards to his guilt, something I talked about in the Avengers episode.
None of that's your fault, Steve.
And then her feminine past comes up to save the day, literally here in the form of Maria Hill.
Who's this guy?
She rescues them, and then they find out that Fury is still alive.
She'll want to see him first.
Which is an even greater connection to the role Nat had at the beginning. But this isn't the end of Nat's journey, which will be when she integrates her masculine and feminine sides, even though their literal representations are now working together. Because Fury tells Steve,
I wasn't sure who to trust.
and the fact that Fury trusted Maria and Steve, but not her, who has given her all to S.H.I.E.L.D.,
When I first joined S.H.I.E.L.D., I thought I was going straight.
is the worst revelation she could get. She understood having to convince Steve to trust her again, but the idea that Fury doesn't trust her after everything they've been through,
See, it's stuff like this that gives me trust issues.
admittedly more implied than on screen, is traumatic. It's unfortunate that this revelation isn't allowed to breathe as much as it could have, because it is very impactful for Natasha and her worldview. Now the next step is when the heroine yearns to reconnect with the feminine. And I would say this is something she feels pretty acutely here when Fury says he didn't know who to trust. She really wants to go back to the way things were. I don't like to use deleted scenes in these videos because, well, it was deleted for a reason and most people won't see it. But Nat has a scene with Fury right after this in which they discuss him not trusting her.
I thought you were dead, Nick.
I had to keep the circle small.
You can tell how upset she is with him as a person, not him as her boss, since she refuses to look at him. Then he explains his actions.
You would have done the same thing.
I know. That's a problem.
The problem is integral to her character journey. She is shown as being comfortable in this world of spies where Steve isn't. But while she's been teaching Steve how to be undercover, she's also been learning from him. And maybe she doesn't want to be so much like Fury anymore. She sees the cracks in that worldview.
That's impossible. S.H.I.E.L.D. would have stopped you.
Which is why, when Steve says,
S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra. It all goes.
and Maria agrees, Nat does not respond, because while she states that
We have to stop the launch.
it doesn't matter to her whether S.H.I.E.L.D. continues to exist. Her trust in Fury is broken because it wasn't returned, and in her own words,
I've been compromised.
the next step is healing the split from the feminine. Her initial split happened when Fury died, and she was no longer going to be working with him and S.H.I.E.L.D.
Don't do this to me, Nick.
But Nat has a unique arc here because her initial split is repeated during her darkest point. Maria saving them restored her faith in Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., but only for a moment. Steve believes that both are too far gone, that Fury's compartmentalization is the reason why corruption could flourish.
Look, I didn't know about Barnes.
Even if you had, would you have told me? Or would you have compartmentalized that too?
Natasha is more immediately concerned with how this revelation caused a personal rift for her.
I thought you were dead, Nick.
So we are really back to a previous journey, where her masculine allies, Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., gave the illusion of success, and now it's been broken as well. For her to really heal the split is to let herself still be a spy, still be good at her job, but no longer trusting Fury as the spy to emulate.
I thought I knew whose lies I was telling, but I guess I can't tell the difference anymore.
So she goes on the mission undercover as Councilwoman Holly to leak S.H.I.E.L.D. intel because, while she could have joined Steve and Sam or Maria, it is the best place for her to prove herself on her own, outside of any allies she's gathered. And that is what heals the internal split with herself.
Did I step on your moment?
The ninth step is making peace with the wounded masculine. Natasha makes peace with Steve way back here.
Would you trust me to do it?
I would now.
So her moment of making peace with Fury is pretty subtle, but very important to her. She has proven herself as a consummate spy on her own, undercover, and now is accepting Fury's help to finish the job.
Don't worry. Company's coming.
But then Pierce attacks the remaining council members and prepares to use Natasha as a hostage. She is ready to shoot him, to risk her own life, but Fury isn't. He puts his gun down first. Peace is made with the masculine because Fury shows that he does care about her.
Natasha. Natasha, come on!
Despite everything he's taught her about the job.
It's a tough way to live.
It's a good way not to die, though.
Compare how Maria chooses to finish the mission even though Steve's life is in danger.
Do it now!
To how Fury isn't willing to sacrifice Natasha to get Pierce, or even risk her getting hurt to stop the top Hydra agent. And though she told Steve that
There's a chance you might be in the wrong business, Rogers.
for wanting a friend, Fury proves here that she can count on him. And importantly, he can count on her, healing that rift. The final step is when the heroine accepts both her masculine and feminine sides to become a complete person. We can see that here in the Senate hearing and at the end. At the hearing, she has moved away from the clandestine world of being a spy, where she is
Not all things to all people, all the time.
but is instead distinctly herself.
You're not gonna put me in a prison. You're not gonna put any of us in a prison.
She stands up for herself, for what she can offer, and refuses to let her past mistakes diminish who she is, an Avenger.
So if you want to arrest me, arrest me. You'll know where to find me.
When she says goodbye to Steve, she makes it clear that she isn't following Fury anymore,
Not going with him?
No.
and is looking forward to defining herself on her own terms.
I blew all my covers. I gotta go figure out a new one.
It might take a while.
I'm counting on it.
It's unfortunate we never got that movie, but it's a great indication of her self-actualization. Overall, I think Natasha goes through a pretty solid journey in this film, especially for a female character. Including that 49-second deleted scene would have made it more obvious, but her emotional arc is still evident in most of her scenes. Like Steve, she has her worldview tested and has to question her identity and what she thought she knew,
I guess I can't tell the difference anymore.
and resolves this by accepting her allies and herself.
Because you need us.
The emotional honesty she shows in this movie, this scene especially, but throughout, is pretty rare for her, and it's great that she gets to be a cocky badass who makes jokes
Hey, Scarlet.
and have strong emotions without any of the negative things that usually accompany those. It's a great representation of one of our rare female superheroes, and definitely one of my favorite comic book movies. The third thing I want to discuss is the gender roles present in this film.
Relax. It's not that complicated.
Let's start with the negative aspect of this and then go to the positive. A long time ago, when this movie was in development, they announced that Emily Van Camp would be the co-lead as Sharon Carter. I won't get too much into it here, but there is a theory that Sharon was going to basically have Natasha's role, and Nat either wouldn't appear at all or would be a cameo. After her popularity in the Avengers and people called for a Black Widow movie, instead of giving us one, they switched the two of them. Now, Marvel does pretty well at keeping these kinds of choices away from the public, but I would not be surprised if this theory is true. For the Avengers, they were going to have the Wasp, a founding member in the comics,
It's about damn time.
but switched her for Black Widow because Nat had already appeared in Iron Man 2. Including Natasha over someone else seems to be a good business practice in response to her popularity, but my concern here is that instead of giving us two or more well-rounded female characters, they just switched one for another, and treating women as replaceable is not something I'm a huge fan of. I mean, no one would think that after Loki was popular in the first Thor and in Avengers that they'd just throw out the Thanos idea and have him be the big bad instead. Or since Bucky was popular in this movie, that they just have him be Cap in the next one, despite some precedent in the comics. But the female characters in the MCU tend to get shuffled around, and it's a problem. One that will come up more in future episodes, so I just wanted to point it out here.
I'm sorry. Did I step on your moment?
But let's get to the positives. Even if there were some replacements behind the scenes, the women in this film are presented as distinct and have their own unique impacts on the story. If Nat's role was initially written for Sharon, it's still a fantastic part for a female character to have. And despite all three of the ladies being female spies, they all have different approaches and personalities that are established. Maria is the company man, so to speak. She works closely to Fury and is intensely loyal to him, able to do whatever he asks of her at a moment's notice.
Give me 4 hours.
You have 3.
She has his back completely,
I need to take him.
but she is willing to change her tune about S.H.I.E.L.D. when Steve calls for it.
He's right.
Sharon is great at being undercover as a nurse, and she has great instincts.
Oh, and I think you left your stereo on.
When her boss is calling for Steve's arrest, she demands to know why.
With all due respect, if S.H.I.E.L.D. is conducting a manhunt for Captain America, we deserve to know why.
She stands up to Rumlow and saves this dude's life, as well as others, I'm sure. And Nat is, of course, more developed than either of them, as I talked about at the beginning of this video. But her relationship with Fury is different from Maria's, and she clashes more with Steve and his righteous instincts than Sharon or Maria. All three of them hide things from Steve at some point or another, but this is never framed as them being in the wrong. If anything, it just shows that Steve is out of his depth with espionage, and all three are integral to helping him during the climax, in different ways. Sharon is there to show that there are some people who are still loyal in S.H.I.E.L.D. and will still do the right thing.
You picked the wrong side, Agent.
Depends on where you're standing.
Maria is there to make sure Hydra doesn't win the day.
But Steve...
Do it! Do it now!
And Natasha is there to make sure that they're destroyed.
She's disabling security protocols and dumping all the secrets onto the internet.
Including Hydra's.
So they all have important parts to play and are not interchangeable, despite having such things in common as their jobs and their gender. So next, let's talk about some roles that movies have traditionally gendered. Frequently, the protagonist has a lovable male sidekick who makes goofy quips.
Either one of you know where the Smithsonian is? I'm here to pick up a fossil.
Oh, that's Nat's. Sometimes the protagonist will get introduced to a lady in a meet cute that turns out to be important later.
Sam Wilson.
Steve Rogers.
I kind of put that together.
Oh wait, that's how he met Sam. He meets Sharon, his, actual love interest, in a pretty different way.
I'm Agent 13 of S.H.I.E.L.D. Special Service. I'm assigned to protect you.
Sharon is a surprise ally who is literally there to protect the protagonist. Definitely something that usually only males do. Natasha is the goofy sidekick.
Secure the engine room, then find me a date.
I'm multitasking.
She's his wise mentor and his wingman. All usually male roles.
Oh, wait, what about that girl from accounting? Laura...
Lillian.
Maria is Fury's right-hand man who shows up in a pinch. Meanwhile, Sam's job is helping with emotional baggage, including Steve's. He offers them sanctuary and cooks for them when they need it. And of course, Bucky is the damsel in distress. In all three Cap movies, actually. And he is not saved by our knight in shining armor slaying the dragon. Though the dragon, Hydra, is slain, Steve saves Bucky by appealing to his emotions and convincing him that he's a person, not just a tool. The usually masculine approach of violence to save someone doesn't work. While even just saying Bucky's name here pulls him out of his programming. And while we're on the subject, a lot of women really like Bucky, not because of, Sebastian Stan's cheekbones, but because of this scene where he's gaslighted and has his bodily autonomy taken away forcibly. That's something we usually only see happen to female characters. Anyway, what character archetype does Steve have? This is a video about Natasha, so I'm not going to get too far into this, but basically he has the same character arc as Jane Eyre, finding out the people he trusted have evil secrets he must overcome. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying the writers were pushing some kind of agenda here or anything, or even that they did all this on purpose. But I am saying that the arbitrary gender roles that Hollywood usually assigns are mostly turned around in this movie. And that is why it has so many female fans. It centers plots and concepts related to our experiences as being important by placing the male protagonist in those roles, and gives the female characters the kind of autonomous roles usually reserved for male characters. There's absolutely no reason for any of these roles to be gendered, and it's so refreshing to see those undone here. So, is Natasha more than a love interest? Is she even a love interest? Her role in the plot is one that usually would be filled by a love interest. Movies that have a male protagonist and a female co-lead, with a few fantastic exceptions, generally have romance as the end goal. Even in Marvel, Pepper and Tony, Thor and Jane, Gamora and Peter, the female characters are there to be the love interest, even if she gets to do more than that. I'm not saying those are bad, but I am saying that this movie was really breaking the mold by not making it a romantic relationship. Natasha's role isn't a love interest who is also helpful at other things. It is just that of a friend/mentor who helps Steve through a really tough time. The personal cost that finding out about Hydra and bringing down S.H.I.E.L.D. has on her is not diminished just because Steve is the lead character. Though her journey could have been a little more fleshed out at the end, she is still thoroughly established as her own person, navigating this story with Steve, but not defined by her relationship to him. And that's what makes this one of her best appearances.
Are you sure you're ready for the world to see you as you really are?
Are you?
All right. Wrapping up, the next in my list of comic book recommendations is, appropriately, the Winter Soldier series, volumes 1 through 4. It's about Natasha and Bucky, teaming up, though the ending is pretty devastating, so maybe just read volumes 1 through 3. Thank you for listening to me talk about the best appearance of my favorite MCU character. Next time, we'll talk about the worst.
You still think you're the only monster on the team?
Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all the things so you don't miss it. See you then!